People think the only thing louder than an ER waiting room is a siren. They're wrong. The loudest thing is a secret that finally finds air. It doesn't shout. It just sits there and keeps existing, and suddenly everything hums at its pitch. You can hear vending machines breathing. You can hear the clock growing bones. You can hear the word peace land like a dropped tray. I'm Jason McLean, 37, the guy in a bank who makes email arrive and printers behave. My tools are logs and tickets and a language of quiet commands that move packets without anyone applauding. I like repeatable processes. I like cables labeled with heat shrink, backups that actually restore, and the feel of a successful ping in my chest. If a day ends with nobody noticing I did anything, that's my kind of win. My wife is Amber, 35. She coordinates events for a company that teaches chaos to line up. Logistics, warehouses, people with radios and clipboards moving pallets, and small armies of temp workers like chess with forklifts. Amber can talk a fire alarm into taking a breath. She remembers birthdays and food allergies and which manager prefers sparkling water with lime. She thinks culture is a verb. When she walks into a room, it starts making sense. My brother is Ryan, 33, firefighting cadet. He's got that posture you get when your day job is learning not to flinch at heat. He's old school decent and sometimes young man reckless, the kind of guy who will apologize for breathing your air while making sure you have it. He had Eli when he was 19, my nephew, now 15, with a girlfriend who left the story when Eli was 6. Ryan's days are 2 parts drill, 1 part shift shadowing, and all parts trying to be better than what scared him the year before. On the day the secret broke, Eli took a bad fall at practice. Denver in December pretends it's kind until it decides it isn't. He clipped the edge of a waxy gym mat, his knee yelled back, and an hour later we were that triangle no one rehearses. Me, Amber, and Ryan in the waiting area at Pre-St. Luke's under a TV with a cooking show turned down to the conspiracy theory level of volume. The air smelled like sanitizer and other people's hard moments. We'd been hosting Eli during Ryan's week of overnights. Our townhouse in Platt Park is small but warm, and our daughter Maya loves her cousin like a brother she can send home when he takes up too much couch. Amber thinks teenagers are walking puzzles. She talks to them like they're interns who just need the meeting agenda in clearer bullet points. The triage desk took Eli back. We did the waiting. Ryan paced a slow trench into the industrial carpet and asked me twice if I thought he'd torn something. I told him, I'm a sysadmin, not a ligament. Amber put a hand on his shoulder like a brake. Amber's mom, Elaine, arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a tote bag like something might need organizing at any moment. She's the kind of woman that makes casseroles for people she's never met and has a church voice that can calm a storm cell. She calls me son in a way I choose to believe. She hugged Eli in the hallway and then hugged a nurse because she has a quota. We sat. Waiting has its own breath. It yawned and looked us in the eye and told us we had time. I watched a nurse walk across the room with a stack of wristbands, and it struck me that we're all labeled for convenience in these places because truth needs categories if it's going to move quickly enough to help. Good thing they can test quickly, Elaine said, almost to herself, like when we did the DNA for peace. It landed like a metal tray. For peace? I said. I didn't mean to make it a question. It was a reflex, like when the lights flicker and your hand finds the flashlight because your body remembers where the dark likes to sit. Elaine blinked, realized the shape of the words in the air, and looked at Amber. It was for peace, she repeated, but softer, as if volume could change content. Amber didn't look at me. She looked at a doorway no one was using, as if she could invent an exit by concentrating. Her jaw moved once, like language was a thing her body did on its own time. What DNA? I asked. My voice was gentle because I make bad things worse when I bring heat. I learned that from a server room that once taught me yelling doesn't cool anything. Jason, Amber said, warning and plea married in a single syllable. Not here! In ER, they don't lie, I said, and I was surprised to hear myself use a sentence I'd never said out loud. It came from the part of me that knows this building is where truth goes when it's tired of being negotiated with. I don't need detail. I need names for the boxes. Elaine put a hand to her mouth like she could rewind. She is, to her bones, a peacekeeper. It's a good instinct. It's also the instinct that labeled a lie peace for 2 years while the truth waited in a drawer. It was, years ago, she said, when Maya was born, for peace. 2, everyone was so stressed. There'd been that rough patch and we wanted to rule things out. Rough patch. A phrase like masking tape over a crack in a wall that's starting to yawn. Ryan stopped pacing. He didn't sit. He became very still in the way you become when a leak turns into a break and you're calculating what you can save without drowning. What rough patch? I asked, but I already knew the outline. My body knew before my mind told itself a story that made it false. I'm not a court. I'm a door. That line popped into my head like a post-it. You swear you didn't put there and now can't deny. Doors don't shout. They open or they stay shut, and both actions mean something. A nurse opened a curtain and told us Eli needed imaging. He waved at us like a boy pretending to be a man, pretending he wasn't scared. I'm going with him, Ryan said, grateful for a task. Amber stood like her bones hurt. Jason, please, she said. We'll talk at home. We went home after the imaging and the brace and the discharge papers you sign like you're signing a treaty with pain. Eli was brave in that specific teenage way where nobody can tell if you're cool or if a dam is about to fail. He stayed at our place that night. Ryan had a shift ending at dawn and wanted Eli to sleep or someone would be awake at 3 if the pain meds went sideways. I put Maya to bed with 2 books instead of 1 and a joke that made her giggle because that's what you do when you need the world to stay ordinary for someone who deserves it. Then, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and the part of the night that turns a house into a confession booth. Amber came down with her notebook. It's the one she uses to plan events, lists that are half supplies and half choreography. On a page with scribbles about centerpieces, she'd written a sentence during a fight months ago and then underlined it until the paper bruised. We aren't hurting anyone. Say it, I said. I made my voice the kind of level I use on overheated routers. I made a mistake, she said, and then shook her head. No, that's too clean. I made a set of choices I told myself were different from what they were. Did you sleep with my brother? I asked, because precision matters more than comfort when you're trying to go from rumor to record. She swallowed, then nodded. It wasn't theatrical. It was the nod you give when you finally choose accuracy over survival. For how long? I asked. A month, she said. Once a week. There was a period when you and I weren't. We were fighting like it was a job and we were clocking overtime. Ryan was around because Eli was struggling and he was at our house a lot, and I could talk to him without feeling like every sentence was a negotiation. It was stupid and selfish, and it felt like taking a deep breath after weeks of shallow ones. It was both. I hate that it was both. When? I asked. She said the dates. My brain did the math it didn't want to do. It overlapped with Maya's conception window, the way hills overlap on a map when you tilt it. The room went quiet in a way that felt like the building was listening. We did the test after Maya, she said. I didn't tell you because I told myself I was protecting you from something you didn't need to carry if it wasn't true. I told myself that if I tell you, I'm only hurting you to serve my guilt. I told myself that because the result said you were Maya's father, the rest could be buried, and that burying is what mature people call moving on. I didn't feel my hands. I felt my breath, like an animal I had to keep from running. My mind went to my car, because thinking about objects is how I avoid launching into air I can't cross. Our Tesla's navigation history doesn't live in the car like a diary, but our phone shows the trips we label to make the tax guy happy. The weeks of day training on her calendar, the ones that didn't match any event at her company because I know how to read her intranet. The routes I could see from the app when the car was borrowed for errands. The pinned location near the fire academy's track. The quiet text she'd sent to Eli 3 months ago when he asked if she could pick him up from practice. Ask your dad. I shouldn't be your second call. I'm not mad at the test, I said finally. I'm mad at the sentence you wrote to excuse it. We aren't hurting anyone. That's how people set fires and then stand very still and tell themselves the heat is a weather pattern. She let out a sound that wasn't a sob. It was the sound a shelf makes when weight slides to the edge. It said, "You," she whispered. It said, "You." And you believed a piece of paper enough to feel safe, I said, but not enough to tell me there was a piece of paper. Because I was a coward, she said. Because when truth hurts, we call it toxic. We say, don't be negatives and don't dwell, because if we translate pain into rudeness, we get to ignore it. We sat there, our house quieter than any policy I've ever read. I realized I didn't want to put her in front of a crowd and crack her open. I didn't want the internet. I didn't want a YouTube comments section to pick at our bones. I wanted something a judge could staple, something a mediator could slide across a table, something a therapist could point to and say, here's where you stopped bargaining with reality. Tomorrow, I said, Eli goes to Ryan's for a bit. He should be with his dad while your mom helps with school runs. We keep it calm for Maya. We tell her nothing she can't carry. We don't move furniture at midnight. We schedule a mediation for a parenting plan. We talk to a therapist who knows that the word safe can be a weapon. We're not safe? She asked, small. Not empty safe, I said. Not the kind you tell yourself when you don't want to change anything. The real kind. The kind that doesn't require lying. She nodded. She put her notebook on the table and slid it toward me. You can read it, she said, if you want, if it helps. Maybe my own sentences will embarrass me enough to be useful. I didn't read it that night. I went to bed and stared at the ceiling until it was a map. In the morning, I called the bank's HR and asked for the name of a mediator they trust. I called my friend who teaches civics and asked her for the name of a therapist who isn't allergic to anger. Then I called Amber's mother and told her a sentence I didn't think I'd ever say. I need you to take Maya this afternoon so I can talk to my brother. Of course, Elaine said. Her voice did its church thing. Jason, she added, I'm sorry. Peace can't be made out of secrets. That was my sin. I baptized a lie and called it mercy. Thank you, I said, because I didn't have a second sentence and she didn't need one. I drove to Ryan's apartment near Curtis Park. He'd gotten off a night shift and looked like a person who'd watched seriousness run laps around a building for 9 hours. Eli was on the couch with his leg propped on a pillow, watching a video of someone tuning a guitar like it was a sport. Can you give us 10? Ryan asked him gently. Eli nodded and rolled into his room with the grace of a crane. Ryan closed the door and leaned against it like the hinges needed him. I didn't tell you, he said, because I was ashamed and because I didn't want to be the grenade in your life. I knew she told her mom. I told myself that was enough adults and I could go back to being a guy with a schedule. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. I was wrong. You were both wrong, I said. It's not a competition. We were together a handful of times, he said, eyes on the floor. I told myself it was a tired kind of intimacy, the kind where two people who do crisis by day want quiet. It wasn't. It was greed. She thought she was drowning. I liked being the rope. I asked Maya if I needed to, and she said she would handle it because she didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to believe her because believing her made me a good guy in my own head. The test said I'm Maya's father, I said. His shoulders dropped like someone cut a cord, and the marionette was grateful. Good, he said, and the word had more relief than happiness. I wanted it to be you. Wanting was never the problem, I said. We sat at his small table where 2 coffee mugs were trying to be a breakfast. There's a look brothers share when they realize they are men and not boys anymore. It's not noble, it's resigned and ugly and somehow still human enough to not make you give up on yourselves. I recorded a call, I said. Today, with Amber. I told her I was recording. I live in a state where that's enough. I need you to know I have a record, not to use as a weapon but as a door. Something official enough to protect both kids from weaponized revisions later. If you argue with me in a year about who moved what when, I have a timestamp. I need to keep the truth from becoming a group chat. He nodded like a pen clicking on. I'll say what I did, he said, on record, not to broadcast, to file. We made the calls. I told Amber I was recording. She said, okay, robotic and grateful to be given rules. I asked her to confirm the timing and that she had tested Maya without telling me. She did. I asked her to confirm that the results said I was Maya's father. She did. I asked her to confirm that she and Ryan had not told me because they didn't want to lose what we had. She did. I said I did not want to talk about blame. I wanted to talk about plan, childcare, schedules, who picks up when. I said a sentence I wrote on a sticky note to keep me from being theatrical. I'm not a court, I'm a door. I'm opening to a clean exit. The mediator scheduled us for a meeting 2 weeks out. In the meantime, we did the boring work of being adults. We drew a calendar that made room for Amber's events and my patch windows and Ryan's shifts and Eli's physical therapy. We made meals. People would eat without an argument. We kept Maya's world small and safe and never used the phrase grown-up stuff, because it's a phrase adults say to hide from their own work. At the mediation, I didn't bring printouts of Tesla route histories or screenshots of family chat messages where confidential visit at clinic sat like a lump in a soup you swear won't affect the taste. I had them in a folder because I'm a checklist man, and checklists are how I breathe. But the point was not to humiliate. The point was to draw a map. Everyone in the room would follow because it had mile markers. The mediator. Her name was Charlene, and she had the kind of presence that made you want to apologize for looking at your phone, asked what we wanted to leave with. A parenting plan we can actually follow, I said. A way to stop litigating the past in the presence of our kid. A schedule for holidays that doesn't weaponize Thanksgiving. Clarity on introductions if and when we date other people so Maya never feels like a guest in her life. Amber said, I want to say I'm sorry without that becoming the only sentence anyone remembers me for. We can do both, Charlene said. We can do all of it if you tell the truth and then respect it. We told the truth. In the sterile, boring way courts like, which turned out to be the way I like too. We wrote it down. We signed. We scheduled next steps, not like threats, but like maintenance, therapy on Tuesdays, exchange protocols for weekends, a rule that says no parent buys expensive presents on the other parent's week and then calls it generosity. I told Ryan to put the same statements in a sworn declaration for his file in case the world went sideways and somebody tried to make Eli choose sides he shouldn't have to map. He did it that afternoon, then called me and said, I don't feel noble, I feel like I'm paying a bill I racked up. That's what accountability is, I said. A receipt. There were moments that wanted to be scenes. People do this thing when truth hurts, they call it toxic. They call you vindictive for not swallowing it with a smile. They say, let it go, when what they mean is, don't make me uncomfortable by being accurate. I nodded through a lot of that and saved my voice for the people whose names were on the calendar with mine. I didn't tell anyone at work, not because I was ashamed, because I didn't need a Greek chorus. I don't want sympathy like a subscription. I want my daughter to have 2 homes where the bills get paid and no one is tempted to make their sadness into her chore. At the follow-up with Eli's orthopedist, the doctor explained ligaments like nylon rope and stretched rubber bands. He talked about healing in terms of quiet courage and the body's memory if you respect it long enough to write a new story. I thought about my house, my marriage, my brother, my bones. Quiet courage. I could do that. I told Elaine I forgave her, not because she asked, but because forgiving her untangled a knot I couldn't sleep around. She cried, then laughed, then put a lasagna in my freezer. I will eat in 2031 because that's how much food is in my freezer now. The day we told Maya, we kept our words small. We sat on the floor. Kids understand better when your knees are where theirs are. We said we love you. We said some adults are better apart. We said you will always have 2 home bases and nothing about your school or your friends or your tooth fairy changes. She asked if she could have 2 advent calendars this year, and Amber and I both promised yes at the same time. Sometimes grace looks like sugar. On a Thursday in January, after a long day of normal tickets, cables, lunch at my desk, someone forgetting their VPN password and swearing the internet was down for everyone, I stood in the ER again, this time for a different patient, a woman with a panic attack who thought her heart was a grenade. I was dropping off a laptop for a nurse I knew because I owe the universe more debt than I can pay. The waiting room sounded the same. People sat with their secrets and their pain and the lousy coffee. I watched a man reassure a child with a sentence that wasn't true but was kind. I thought about all the lies we tell for comfort and how little they cost until the bill shows up. I left without making the place my stage. I walked into the parking garage and breathed exhaust and cold. I unlocked the car and sat there with the heater off. The quiet felt earned instead of stolen. I'm not saying this is how everyone should do it. I'm saying this is how I did it and why I can sleep. I didn't put anybody on blast. I didn't turn my family into an anecdote for people who need something to talk about between their own fires. I collected the boring facts. I put them into boxes. I let the boxes do their work. I kept custody first as my north and no public humiliation as my guardrail. I told the truth in rooms that could use it. I kept the rest in rooms that couldn't. People tell you to move on like it's a train and you missed your stop. They don't tell you what to do with the echo that follows you down the platform. Here's what I did. I started running again, slow, the way you run when you're learning your body's new map. I learned to cook 3 things well. I bought a second set of everything that makes a morning. Toothbrushes, bowls, socks. So Maya's life didn't feel like a carry-on. I kept a little list in my notes app labeled maintenance, air filters, oil changes, therapy appointments, difficult conversations I'm eventually going to have with a 15-year-old who remembers more than he says. I also wrote a line and taped it to the inside of the cabinet where we keep Tylenol. I am not a court. I am a door. On days I want to audition for judge, I open a door instead to a counselor's office, to a mediation table, to a friend's porch, to my own kitchen where the light is unromantic and right. What would you have done? Would you have blown the roof off the ER and turned the waiting room into a jury? Or would you have done what I did, take the hurt out of the hallway, write it down, and give it to rooms that know what to do with paper? Tell me in the comments. And if you think quiet truth beats loud theater, hit like and subscribe. It tells the algorithm to bring more stories like this to people who need the right kind of door.